And I'm sharing my screen, I hope. Okay, so I'm going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Welcome to the March CI Mastermind Live. Hopefully, everyone's starting to get a little bit of a taste of spring, depending on where you are at in the country. There's a fair number of new faces, a lot of regulars, but a fair number of new faces on as well. So as always, I'm going to hit the highlights. You are on CI Mastermind Live, and what we do is we are continuous improvement professionals or continuous improvement interested individuals, process engineers, and so on and so forth. And we get together once a month to discuss a topic. Typically there's, anywhere between, I think typically we're hitting about 15 people on these calls. Brief learning, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then real-time problem solving. So not a webinar per se, but really a discussion and hopefully solve something. And that's in the CI Mastermind philosophy there, is that we're not just talking, but we're solving. Rotational format, as always, we try and get different people on the call chatting. We don't get to everybody's question, but we do our best. Given that we've got a large and diverse group in here, we want to make sure we respect each other on this call. We want to make sure that we don't share things that shouldn't be shared, because we can get into some detail on our companies and what's going on. We want to make sure that we keep things that are not supposed to be public, not public. And that we help to resolve each other's problems. So that's the idea here, is that you're all here to help each other out. I don't have all the answers. Bruce doesn't even have all the answers.
I was going to say that I did.
But amongst the many of us on the call here, we can find the answers. This session is recorded and transcribed, and you are now a YouTube star. Actually had someone send me a note that Chris, when we posted our most recent, he said, "Hey, I'm on YouTube now." And we're like, "Yes, you are. Thanks for the cameo." And so we do use this in some of our marketing. So just making sure you're aware of that. We like to see your face. If you can turn on your camera, please do. Bruce is going to be interacting, and it helps to see the person that they're talking to. So we can see the inflection and so on and so forth in their eyes, in their face, in their language, and so on. Use the chat. So again, I think we've got a few new folks on the call. So just your role, your company, that kind of thing. And then we've been doing this. You're okay, Chris. No worries. That's Chris Z. We've been doing this biggest win. So, and I think that's been pretty popular, and I've liked going through the wins afterwards and just seeing if there's anything that we want to follow up on from a sharing perspective. So, your name, your company, your role, and if you've got a big win that happened in the last 30 days that you want to share, please do share that. It's good for everybody to see, and plus you should get a little bit of accolades yourself. You know what I mean? I'm doing my introduction now. I've got a couple other short things to do, and then Bruce is going to take over, and he's going to talk about his topic today, which is innovation, and we'll go through your responses to the registration. Next month, we will have Mir Atib Ali on. Some of you know that he is one of our Chalmers Street team members, and he does some technology, I would say, development work for us. And he's going to be talking about a tool he's been building that's taking maintenance manuals and using them as a knowledge base for AI. So any of you that have a large set of manuals or knowledge that needs to be more interactive, because we know the answers are there, but we're not getting at them. Mir's attacking that with an AI tool that's, I think, somewhat straightforward to build. So he'll probably talk about the mechanics of what he's doing and also what he's seeing from that. So that's going to be in April. I hope you will join us for that, and I'll send out the registration link after this. I think that's it. I think on my side, from a Chalmers Street perspective, I just wanted to share a couple things. So one, if anyone is having or has had problems with the Calendly link or registering that way, probably the people that have problems aren't on the call, so that's not going to help much. But if you have had any issues, just shoot me a note because it is a new process, and I want to make sure that we're not creating any issues there. In September, Chris and I are going to run this via Zoom. I know this is typically via Teams because a lot of you said you prefer Teams, but we think we can do a little bit different things with video editing on Zoom, so we wanted to give it a try. So that's not till September. I'm just letting you know that now. And in January, I mentioned a lot about our Leader Standard Work program and what we are doing with companies on Leader Standard Work and the platform. And last month, early this month, we rolled out an engagement score for Leader Standard Work. We have a couple clients using it. Actually, we'll have 3 clients using it after tomorrow. And we're already seeing some interesting things. It's definitely causing people to focus on their better interaction with Leader Standard Work. And their managers have put goals around that engagement score on Leader Standard Work. So I want to give it a few months before I give you kind of a full detail of that. But it's doing what we were hoping it would do in this early phase. And I'll have more to say about how it's driving engagement later this year. Okay, I think that is it. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to hand it over to Bruce. Bruce, if you could do a brief introduction on yourself, introduce the topic, and then let's get the conversation going.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks again for being here. And thanks, everybody, for your time today. I really appreciate this opportunity to connect with you all. My name is Bruce Vojak. I've worked in innovation and renewal of companies, in mature companies and in mature industries my entire career. Originally a bench research engineer, and from there became a technology executive. My last corporate position was at Motorola, before everything changed at Motorola, so not unlike Matt. And ended up at the University of Illinois at Urbana, was there for almost 20 years. And while I was there, I conducted research on innovation. So I've practiced it. I've now conducted research. While at Illinois with a couple of co-authors, I wrote this book about innovation, published by Stanford University Press. For the last decade, I've been out working with companies on a full-time basis. And the last one was on mature companies, mostly large companies. This is on small and medium-sized, mostly medium-sized companies, a book also published by Stanford University Press. So I like working with companies. I like trying to help them think through these kinds of things and renew their business. That's the focus. So unless there are questions, I'm going to just jump into showing a handful of slides. Okay, great. What I have is, and tell me, are you seeing the deck properly here? Good. Okay. I'm always a big fan of getting everybody on the same page. So I like starting with definitions. And so what I'm going to do, if I can click the right slide here, what's innovation? Okay. I like to begin by what it's not, and it's not necessarily creativity or new. If you can see this picture, maybe I should have used a color version. It's not a wooden handle with a metal axe head. It's a wooden axe head with a metal handle. So very creative, but not necessarily innovative. And you'll see what I mean by this. I think this is marvelous too, but it's not going to happen. It's also not necessarily technology. A lot of people link innovation with technology entirely. It's not. It can play a role, but it's not linked to it entirely. And instead, this is my punchline definition. It's actually productive use, commercial use with financial impact. So, I can be a musician and I can be very creative, but, I can enjoy that. It can entertain my friends, but it's not considered innovative in my definition unless I'm actually getting financial impact from it. Somebody is, at least. And then I add one other thing too, and this is where I'm going to focus today. In the best case, you're changing how competition occurs. So it's not only new and attractive financially, you're changing how competition occurs, because when you do that, and if you can lead that, you can get remarkable advantage, financial and strategic advantage. So what does that mean? I think some of you may be familiar with the S curve. It basically says that all companies, products, processes, businesses, industries follow this kind of curve. There's kind of this bubbling initial stage. We're in this with AI right now, this A emergence phase. A lot of different things are being tried. There's not one real firm solution. A lot of things being tested, a lot of things being tried. And at some point, usually something grabs hold. And then you see a rapid growth period in that industry or with that product. Either somebody says, hey, I like this product, and a bunch of other people follow suit. You go through rapid growth. It moves from being this kind of bubbling phase, this startup phase almost, to where you start establishing processes, you start establishing manufacturing capabilities that are much larger, you scale the organization. And at some point, it starts to saturate and you hit maturity. And at that maturity phase, it's, each of these phases is somewhat different. And what I want to talk about now is what are your options at maturity? When you're at the C phase, what does it look like? And you've got three options. One is to extend maturity. And this is where, you're looking to do cost reductions. You're looking to do design optimizations. You're probably introducing new products, but they're new products where you're tweaking some of the design parameters. So if you're selling a laundry detergent, you're adding some kind of a scent to it, or a fabric softener to your laundry detergent, or you're selling your product into a new geographic market, but you're kind of sticking with what you've got and you're extending it. The next thing you can do is exit the business. And, this is pretty dramatic, but it can be an asset sale. It can be a sale of an ongoing business. It can just be running things out because you just can't keep up with business. And so your revenue will drop, your margins will drop. And those are really kind of, that's an option that eventually happens in just about every industry. It's just a matter of timing. And the third option I want to focus on is what I refer to as renewing the business. And usually this activity starts before you hit maturity, but you want to do it early enough so that by the time your existing business is at maturity, you're already starting into this growth phase for the new business. So what does this look like? Let's get some examples. A good example from my perspective is called the box cutter. What else would sound like a mature industry than making box cutters? I don't know. Can you guys see this? Can you see the image that I've got on screen? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I'm still learning how to use Teams here, so bear with me. Or I forget between the times I use it. And here, let me expand the screen so I can see myself. So this is a box cutter. And my colleague Walter Herbst, who I co-authored that second book with, he's a design guy, actually very famous design guy. And he and his son Scott have a design firm, and they have a colleague who said, I think we can make a better box cutter. And they used this concept of design thinking, and they really deeply understood the customer need. And they went from this idea of having a metal box cutter with a metal blade, and they've got this design to be very safe. You put it in your pocket, and if you do this, it's not going to drop to the bottom of your pocket and poke a hole in your leg. It's got a ceramic blade that's easily retractable. The ceramic blade lasts 10 times longer. By the way, I don't make anything. I'm not pitching you guys this, but my wife and I call this our Walter because Walter is the one that introduced it to us. But the point is, it's a rethinking of a box cutter, and it's renewing the business. And they've actually, Slice has done quite well. I think they ultimately sold the business. But any box cutter company could have done this, but they didn't. And instead, they're looking at, I'm just going to say, I don't want to be disparaging, but they're looking at reducing the cost of box cutters. And Walter and his son and their partner TJ, they're saying, let's rethink this. So let's come at this another way. Let's look at what these options.
Bruce,
yeah,
please.
Do
you mind? Can I? Because you said
please.
Something there that was really important, and I want to make sure we make the connection to continuous improvement.
Yeah, please.
And there's a few things actually. So interesting enough, when you shared that book, I started paying attention, and I see those box cutters, the innovative one, at some of my clients. So yes, I think it is successful, and it does show how you change the marketplace when you do something truly innovative. You said something else there that is really crucial, which is we sometimes look at the cost reduction is not innovative, right? In itself. Yeah. And if you haven't, read Michael Porter's Harvard Business Review from the 90s, What is Strategy? And he really goes at continuous improvement, frankly, in there, not purely, but partially, because, and especially in the 90s, companies were almost using continuous improvement as a strategy, and it's not. It's an enabler. And I believe if we're doing our job as continuous improvement people, we are creating the space for innovation, right? We can enable innovation. We can create an environment for innovation, but we're not innovating, especially when we're focused on efficiency, quality, and delivery, right? We're just fixing some of the things that take up the mind space and the time of our companies that prevent them from going, what if? Could we try this? How about we take a couple people out of the production environment and spend a little time just kind of blowing up what we're doing and think of something completely different? You have to have great efficiency, great on-time delivery, great, right? In order to have the space to do those things. That's why I think what Bruce is telling us is so important. So I just wanted to make sure we make that connection on this call. And Bruce, thank you for letting me chime
in. And actually, Matt, two quick things. One is I want to echo that and say, and again, I make like $1 per book, so I'm not.
Bruce is a pitch man on the side. Pitch man is his side gig. sorry, go ahead.
In this book, because I wrote some of the sections that talked about the relationship with things like, Lean and Six Sigma implementations. And I never tell companies don't do that. Never, because you got to do that in a mature industry. You've got to be working those things, but it's complementary, as Matt's saying. The other thing, when you mentioned about this being valuable to companies and you're seeing it with your clients, I want to point out, I'm talking about features like the blade and the hook. The reason why this started to sell so well, they went out to the market thinking they were going to sell it to individuals, and you can buy this on Amazon. But the big win for them was when they were at a trade show and they found out that corporate clients were interested because it reduced their insurance costs, because it's a safer box cutter. And, this is the idea of trying these things and getting customer insight and what does this all look like? So I want to say it's not just a cool looking cutter, because it is cool, I think, but and it reminds me where it is. I always know where I last saw it, but it has some real deep value. And that's what I want to be sure that I'm saying. Innovative means that there's some commercial value that's associated with this. So Matt, thanks. I'm glad you pointed this all out. So I'm going to give a couple of other examples, what this looks like. What does it look like when you change the basis of competition? And I just talked about box cutters. My favorite story is about peeling carrots. So over 100 years ago, if I wanted to peel a carrot, I'd use a knife. And some people still do. So I'm not saying it's never done. And if you're like me, you're going to cut too deep or too shallow, you're going to cut yourself, and it's a problem. And literally about 100 years ago, you look at the patent literature and you start seeing these safety peelers. And now they're like, I used to say $1.99. They're probably like $4.99 on Amazon. You can buy an all-metal safety peeler. The blades are pointed in. You're very much less likely to cut yourself. And probably for about 70 years, this was the dominant product, but very different. And then what happened? You got into the 90s, and this company, it's spelled OXO. In fact, the story behind this real quickly, the guy that did this was a design person, not unlike Walter. And he saw his wife, who had arthritis, wasn't able to peel carrots well. And so he cut off the handle of a broomstick and stuck a peeler on it, and then she could peel carrots more comfortably. Now, you may want to ask yourself, why didn't he peel carrots for her? But financially, this did much better than him going into the kitchen. And the point is, he's got this whole business that grew out of this by just reconsidering the peeler. And then the last thing that you'll be familiar with is pre-peeled baby carrots. Again, really asking yourself, what do customers want? But each time, within each one of these circles, there's a way of doing things. There's a way of competing. And each time somebody comes up with something new, they're changing the basis of competition. I want to keep coming back to that with you, because and we can talk about scales of how much it changes. The pre-peeled carrots, it's a big change. So, and I'm going to go back and say, you see this everywhere. Look at calculating. My favorite is I ask people who are the biggest suppliers of handheld calculators today. and they think it's like Texas Instruments or Sharp, and no, it's the app on your phone, you know? And I forget things like that. And you look at things like Olympic high jump records, there's different ways people did it over the years. It follows the same pattern. And so what does that pattern look like? It says there's, this word paradigm you probably hear sometimes. There's this paradigm of competition. There's a way people do things. And within that way, you extend maturity. You reduce costs, you make design optimization decisions. Again, looking at the patent literature for the safety peeler is marvelous because there were a lot of different ways people were trying to do it. And then it kind of settled into one way that was pretty common. And then somebody gets this idea to do something different. They renew the industry. They change the basis of competition. And so these charts, the chart I showed earlier with the S curve, is intimately linked to this chart. So I just want you to see there's these two different kinds of innovation I'm talking about. One is renewing the industry. I refer to that as breakthrough innovation. Extending maturity includes things like continuous improvement and like what I would call incremental innovation. Those are all kind of lumped in there. But if you really want to differentiate, you pretty much have to ask yourself, how are we doing things really differently? And so if there are questions, let's go for it. If not, or comments, I can go into to discuss some of the feedback I got from you guys before the session. So tell me what you'd like to do, guys, and I'm with you.
Let's jump into feedback, and if you have a certain one that you want to start with, I do have a couple of responses that I want to dig into, Bruce. Yeah. So do you want me to go there first?
Well, let me give the big picture that I saw. Okay, a few days ago, Matt sent me the feedback that you guys gave him. By the way, I love the fact that you guys come to this prepared by even answering a few questions, because it's as easy for me to do something and like 10 minutes later I forget what I was doing. And so a little bit of pre-thought goes a long way. So what I did was I read the comments, the crisp comments that everybody provided. And then I looked at them and I said, okay, am I seeing some kind of a pattern in these? So I took your comments and then I created what I thought were some higher level, meaning like aggregate descriptors. And so I think there's 22, I think that's up to 22 at the time. I think you got a couple more. I said, how many are focused entirely on continuous improvement? How many say it's critical and it's core to our business? How many say it's really senior levels are doing this? How many say they don't necessarily say it's continuous improvement, but it's not as much in operations? Several said not important. Some said it's an afterthought. Wonderfully, and I mean this in the best sense, transparent comments and observations you guys made. And so I'm a big fan of anonymous and aggregate for a conversation like this, unless you guys want to self-describe. So I took those and I said to myself, when I look at these things that, except for the technology focus, which kind of stood alone, which ones had two or more, responses? And then I said, well, and, again, don't take this red, orange, yellow, and green to heart as anything bad. But I'm saying green is more like, hey, we're looking at breakthrough innovation and renewal, at least somewhere in the organization. Yellow is, yeah, we're doing it, but it's not as clearly stated as that. Not that being unclear is bad. It's just not as explicit as the other. And then when you get down to red, it's like, hey, we're not even thinking about it. I don't want to, again, diminish the continuous improvement focus, but that's really working within the paradigm. And I took those and then I consolidated them here. And I said, when I look at this, I'm going to say a little over a third of you are in companies, or maybe yourselves are practicing it this way, who are at least asking the question, how do we renew? Do we renew? And I'm going to quickly add, this may throw the conversation into a tailspin. You may not always find a renewal, but if you're not asking the question, you leave yourself vulnerable to either missing it yourselves or having a competitor do it to you. So a little over a third are doing it, did it in how you squint your eyes. Half at least are really not thinking about it. And I just found it interesting. And again, I don't want to sound like a Midwesterner. I'm not criticizing this. I think a lot of it is, where your functions are in the organization. I view my role often as saying, I want you guys to be aware of this because it's critically important for companies to survive and thrive. That's the tagline in the consulting that I do. I really want companies to survive and thrive. And you can get blindsided, maybe not the whole box cutter industry, but you can miss something if you don't do things like this. So that's my my thoughts and comments. Hopefully this wasn't too long, but because I do want to get to the conversation. So thank you guys.
So I have some things I want to ask, but I actually would like to open it up to the group. And you don't have to call yourself out if you don't want to talk about being in the reactive space, but you can. There's nothing wrong with that. Does anyone have any reaction to the data that Bruce is showing, or other questions from what he said that you want to probe?
I'm still chewing on innovation and the tie to continuous improvement. And like you said, Matt, continuous improvement might create space for innovation, but I think there's a lot of similarities between the two. So I'm still chewing on that a little bit.
And is that because, Scott, you feel like they could be one and the same, or and that you're reacting to going, I'm saying they're different and you're saying they're one and the same? Is that what you're reacting to?
I think so. I mean, maybe not one and the same, but like I said, I probably have to think about it a little bit more, but the principles behind both are kind of the same. Even the S curve, it's a innovative S curve. If you are finding that opportunity, great. It's the same thing with continuous improvement. It's you're gonna stall out where you're at if you don't see the next opportunity to improve. The principles behind it of going to understand the process or what's happening in the environment and seeing it and doing something about it. So maybe I'm too high level with it. But
actually, I was kind of expecting to hear that. I saw Edge put his hand up, so I want to hear from Edge. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's interesting within ADI. Mind you, I've only been here a year, but the rebuttal I get is that the innovation and continuous improvement can't work together because one, continuous improvement is, believe it or not, they look at it as very rigid. There's a lot of forms, there's all this methodology. I got to put this framework in it. You're not letting me be creative. And we are a highly creative company with people who are constantly working on interesting things, but yet they work through processes. So I want them to show them that it's an intersection between the two, and that's why I'm on this call, because I think it's a miss, unfortunately.
If I can quickly comment on that, and I can go back to Scott's too. It's funny. I got more slides than anybody cares to look at, but one of them that I love to show in response to something like this is where I say that what I'll call an optimization culture, which to me is continuous improvement, optimizing within the paradigm, has to reside successfully in tension with this idea of renewal. And tension sounds negative, but if you look at the characteristics of the two, they can be very different. Mm-hmm. And the problem is when one swamps the other. And in a startup, everybody's arms and legs and running around and coming up with ideas. And in a mature company that's making the metal safety peelers, they're at the other end of that. And my comment is, how do you find a way to get them to live together? And and so yeah, I mean, you kind of need both, and I think it needs to be respectfully both. And that's partly why, I mean, it's partly, but not entirely. I mean, I see intrinsic value to continuous improvement, but it's got to be there. If you're not doing it, you're going to lose. And that goes back to what Scott said. I think if you're not always finding this next way to reduce cost, if somebody else finds those ways before you, or they find more of them than you, they're going to price you out of the business. But Matt talked about Porter. I encourage you to read that article too. Matt reminded me of it, a month ago or so, and I reread it and with new eyes. And his comment is that cost reduction you really can't get competitive advantage because everybody's going to kind of know the same kinds of things over time. Sorry if I'm
No, it's great, and I have lots of thoughts. I saw Brandon, your hand was up. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Jump.
So I was thinking about when your comment on being able to pull staff out. I was wondering if you can go a little bit more into that. So because occasionally we can pull our staff out for continuous improvement, but I work in biomedical. And so you end up where basically you have your operator group and they're doing the day in, day out stuff. And then you have your R&D group, and that's all like PhD level of people. So there's just a big disconnect I see. And so I was curious if you had any insights in terms of maybe how you bridge that gap between, okay, you can free up the operator. How do you effectively utilize that operator to help you develop new things?
Bruce, do you want to go? Or,
I mean, I've got an observation.
Go.
I've got an
go,
observation. I've worked in I was at Motorola, Amoco before that. I worked in R&D groups, and especially Motorola is closely tied to an operating group. And you get to a certain point when you're developing a new product or a new process for that matter, where you've got to tap into the existing manufacturing capability. And so you may not in my experience, you may not always pull the people out of the manufacturing, but you're going to have to find ways to do things there. And, I'm going to tell you, in semiconductor field, which is my background, they're always worried about contaminating the process if you come up with something new. I can only imagine in a bio firm, if you do something new there, it can contaminate it. I had a client once, a quality guy, and a client once that just shut down everything new because he really was firm about following certain quality procedures that were applied, I felt, prematurely before you could even prove that there was a product that had value there. And so, again, this goes back to this concept of tension that I was thinking about, Brandon, that how do you find a way to do that? But you work with them because usually the people in operations, they're the ones that are going to know that you can make it more than once. The R&D guys often, I made it. You guys go make money on it. You got to find people that can bridge that.
So can I chime in too on this?
Yeah, please.
On this one, and I think it may touch on. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you were saying, Edge, but I feel like it's kind of similar. Brandon, in my view, innovation is a process, right? And I can create a specific structure that ensures I'm doing innovative activities. And when I say make the space, I'm saying that if I'm trying to think of a simple way to put this, but mechanically we work off of budgets, right? Most of our companies anyways work off of budgets. And if I have all of my team members 100% tied to day-to-day output, right? It means that I don't have any space, right? And therefore I cannot create any process to pull them out of those places and get them to start thinking about innovative activities. Now, you asked a question that I can't perfectly answer, which is, okay, but how do you create that space? That might be a better question for Bruce, right? Like who, like for me, the space where I do my most innovation is in a Kaizen event, right? Where we're letting people be creative. It wouldn't meet Bruce's, by the way, it wouldn't meet Bruce's definition of creativity because most of my Kaizen events aren't creating something that's for the marketplace, but they are creating a space where people can think about problem statements and issues that exist and step away from the way we're currently solving them to be creative in how we could solve them in the future. And so that would be a mechanism that I use, but it doesn't necessarily meet Bruce's definition. Nonetheless, you could create a process that meets Bruce's definition. And that's what I'm trying to say, that in continuous improvement, we have the power to create those structures and create that space to do those things. And we should recognize that continuous improvement itself is not that, right? It is kind of more what Bruce is saying, which is thinking about how you're solving the customer's problem from a product perspective and what might be completely a different way of doing that. Does that help, Brandon? Because it's a really great question that you're asking.
I think It does I think the mechanism is, so I'm kind of thinking it back. Maybe it's taking the operators off the line and sending them to the R&D area to say R&D to say, hey, here's what we're designing. How does this look like it's going to produce? And maybe that's how you can actually utilize that frontline who's not going to do that R&D typically, provide insight to create a better overall product that you're going to come out with future. Because that's my experience is the same as yours, Matt, where it's Kaizen trying to improve with the work we do now versus making a whole new product. So that's what I was.
But you can run
mental
Kaizens.
disconnect.
You can run Kaizens that are requirements based, and aren't tied to existing processes, but tied to requirements that you're trying to achieve. And if you run like we'll do, if we're doing a new factory or something, we'll do a whole principles session. Say, what are the principles? What are the design principles behind this new factory? And we're throwing out everything that we know about the current process, and we're just thinking about the principles and how we can create process to achieve those principles. That opens people's headspace up to a lot more creativity than if you start with a current state and work off of a current state. But I want to do a couple things here. This is, hopefully you guys agree. I think it's a great conversation. Dave, you've had your hand up a couple times, and so I want to make sure we get to you. And Chad, I see your hand up as well. So let's do that. And then I have a question possibly for Bruce, depending on where the conversation goes. So Dave, you're up.
Well, you answered part of my question with innovation in the product or innovation in the process. We produce what our customers tell us to produce. So I rely mostly on the process for how can we make it quicker, better, cheaper. But and maybe this helps a little bit. Sometimes I get some pushback from the guys on the plant floor when I try to make their jobs easier. They say, well, you must not think I'm smart, or you're trying to. There's another word for it that I don't like. But my response is, no, I'm trying to make this job so easy for you, and some simple. Instead of using a tape measure, let's paint the things red, blue, and green. So you just grab the red one and you don't have to measure. And that sometimes seems to insult people. But my response is, I'm trying to make your job so easy that you have time to think about how we can make it better, not just survive. How can we make this? You use your mind power for good rather than getting the day done.
Agreed. And agreed. I want to go to Chad next because there's some thoughts I have. But Chad, go next, please.
No, the point I was just going to make, and I think it's been touched on since the first question was, but how to get the operators involved. And it's not necessarily taking them away from their core responsibility being on the line, but getting them involved early on at the line. So you might not even have a conceptual product yet done at the R&D stage, but understanding the challenges that they're doing in today's world at the line, grabbing that feedback early on, and design around what their process is. Design what they're doing. David, your point there of trying to making things easier instead of using a tape measure, painting the lines on the table so they can do it, or color code things. Those are all great initiatives, but when we look at things from a high level objective to understand the process, everything that's created in an office doesn't resonate on the shop floor because the shop floor didn't come up with it. So understanding, getting them involved before the product's out, talking to them about what that future state is, I'm not going to throw a percentage at it, but chances are it's going to hit better when you're at the stage where the operators are now getting involved to building it. They feel more receptive because their feedback early on about this widget, this fixture, this close, how to clamp things down, how to fasten it, was taken into consideration. So when they see that first step, that first R&D thing, they feel involvement. And I think that's key, is that involvement early on. Not just taking them off the line to ask them a question about the 7th step, but ask them early on where their thoughts are. That's just my take. That's all.
If I can briefly, because both what Chad said, Brandon said, and I think a few others, we're talking now about taking people off the line to work on it, and that's good. That's a valid activity. Another way that I interpret what Matt has said is when the people doing continuous improvement are doing their job and cost reducing, they're generating resources that can then be reinvested in some other area. So when Brandon, you talked about an R&D group, or Chad, you talked about another group that's developing products or processes, even that funding flow is a way of getting them involved. And so, sometimes, and I see this, I mean, look, I see this in people in the research and innovation groups. I see this in people in the process improvement groups. If your tie is more to your profession than your company, you're going to get a different kind of attitude about it. If you're all tied to making the company win, one group's generating cash, the other one's investing it prudently, hopefully, to keep that business going, and then everybody has longevity. That's, to me, that's kind of the goal of all this. Keep the business, again, surviving and thriving.
So, Bruce, I want to put you on the spot. And you and I have kind of had this conversation before, and I think it's a hard question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways. And maybe a little more context there. Like your audience here right now, we are continuous improvement people, and we're talking about things in a very tangible, continuous improvement way, right? Just when I heard kind of Chad and Dave talking, like we're talking about things that are really in the weeds and the minutia of the day-to-day work. And you're describing something kind of that feels like kind of up here. And Brandon asked what I think is a great question, a practical question, but which is, okay, I do my process improvement, I do my visual management, I'm creating space, and now I have resource availability for people to take them out and think about true innovation. What are the mechanisms for that? How does that look? Like we like to pull out cause and effect diagrams and value stream maps and stuff like that, but I don't. How did these folks take a razor that we've used for all of our lives and completely think differently about that? Like, what are the mechanisms, the human dynamics, the people that you put in the room? I think Brandon was asking that too. That allows you to do that. If you go ahead, just talk it out, please.
Yeah, and this is without being fully formed. I haven't addressed this in a while, but for the first thing I would do is I would get rid of any, and this is going to sound maybe dramatic, get rid of any suggestion box you've got in your organization. Okay. But then in the next breath, without taking a breath, I'll say, develop the people in the organization, the people on the line, help them understand who really is using this product, help them understand who's upstream and downstream from their process. Because the larger innovations occur by people doing what I call collecting and connecting the dots. And when you have a very focused view of your activity, you're doing one step and you're optimizing that step, you'll get a good optimization. You'll get a win. Okay. But if I know what's going on up and downstream from me, I'm going to probably be able to, with them or even in my own thinking, have an idea that's going to optimize amongst the three of us. Or if I understand the customer's needs, I'm going to optimize more. And so one thing I always tell people is, if you got people doing suggestions, train them what constitutes a good solution. And that involves a broader view of your own function, and it involves a broader view of the company. And that includes, I've said this separately, the best innovators are serving, they're the best innovators, they're deeply motivated to solve customer needs. So, your company has customers, but you've got a customer in your production facility. They're the next people down the line. And, so they're deeply interested in solving customer needs, but they're also addressing the needs of their colleagues because they're helping people stay employed. They're solving the needs of the shareholders because they're creating things that have value. I mean, everything aligns when you're doing this well, but it usually involves a bigger picture. So part of my thinking is, and I've seen this work on an individual basis where a colleague of mine had worked in several manufacturing facilities. As he walked around, and I don't know if you'd really call it a Gemba walk, but as he walked around, he would be helping people understand the larger context of their work. And I think that's step one. Help them understand the larger context.
So I love it. My best kind of practical example of that is we had a group, industrial design group at Motorola, and we did have a process, and they were called kind of the fuzzy front ends, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
stuff that they were doing was, and they weren't, these were designers, frankly. They were very capable of having a broader view of functionality, and they would go to like Home Depot, they would go to FedEx, and they would watch people utilize tablets and the different equipment that they might need to enter information, gain information, and then they just come back and kind of ideate, right? It's a very loose process, and it requires what Bruce is saying here, which is a broader view of your own function. And if you can get folks, your operators, whoever, to do that, or to really understand, like another thing we did at Navtech, we took our production employees and we put Garmin handheld devices in their hands so they could see the map and they could understand and get a little bit better idea of how people are interacting with the maps that they're building. So it's just finding those ways to expand. But it isn't a super mechanical process. It's a bit touchy-feely.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, and I've shared this with other companies, but I actually did an innovation training, if you will, for a group of operations managers, like first line managers of a production facility once. And it's fascinating because my comment is everybody in that production line has a hobby, I'm sure. They're either grilling things on the weekend, they're maybe doing some craft, maybe they're playing a musical instrument or a sport. How do they learn how to improve what they're doing? They immerse themselves in it. They start doing these things. Innovation is a very human act. And so the more we try to make it into I'm a big fan of Deming, the more that we try to make it into plan, do, check, act without really understanding what's going on in that P. What's going on in that P is I'm learning how to use my grill. My view is I want these people to connect what they're doing on the weekend and the evenings. It's the same mindset at work. I just want to learn this stuff. Sorry if I'm getting excited about this.
I think it's great. I think this conversation has been a long time coming. We are over time, but I'm going to do two things. Lynn gets to say comment, and Sarang, you get final word. So go ahead, Lynn.
I just want to extend what you were saying, Matt, about the industrial design group. I don't even remember exactly what we called the group. But one of the things that we did was explicitly pair the industrial design that was going out into the field to observe our customers with the engineers that were going to be responsible for figuring out, okay, how do we meet that? And so that helped get them to start thinking more out of the box and not just, well, okay, this is what we did in the last time. How do we incrementally make it better? But think more radically and tie explicitly the customer need to what the engineers were focusing on. So it was a design organization, so they were really our frontline people and getting them out and interacting with the customers, as well as bringing customers in and showing them prototypes and getting feedback at an early stage of saying, well, yeah, this is how we thought it would work, and no, they're going to do it differently.
Broader view of their function. Perfect. A broader view of their function. That's what I take from that. Sarang, last word, my friend.
Yeah. So Bruce, I think, like in order to have creativity, you have to have freedom too, right? I think the startup often been successful, like companies like Google, Meta, like this, they gave free hand, 15-20% time that, people are willing to do things that they like, right? And that's where your imagination is stretched. Like there are a number of examples like Orkut, Google News, right? You name it, like all these products came by somebody who was just trying out something, right? That was not part of your design criteria, right? That was not your part of the regular job, right? Unless or until you gave a freedom, right? The company are saying that, okay, you have some budget, you have leeway to fail, but give me something which is out of the box. And if you're not giving that challenge to the, like the people who are excited, that's where we are limiting our innovation, right? Being structured thinking, 5% or 3% growth. Okay, let's add O-ring, let's add shiny part. That is not innovation. The innovation is to give them a free hand, obviously, but with the guardrails, right? And let them be creative, right? And let you support that they are okay to fail. I think that's where it will strive the innovation the most.
And if I can respond, and I'm Matt, I could be here till 4. I apologize because I love this conversation.
Last comment. I want to respect people's time. Last comment.
Sarang, I like what you're saying, but I'm going to give you a yes, but, okay? I'm going to say that the company's responsibility is to make their decision-making about what gets implemented in innovation neither more challenging or less challenging than the marketplace. You want executive investment to mirror the marketplace. And so I'm going to just tell you up front, my inclination is to not give those 4 hours a week because the people that I've seen that have succeeded in doing this on the weekend, they're thinking about their job. They're thinking, what about this? And they're self-motivated to do this. So the executive's job is to not shut those people down because this is heretical. I'm not sure how much executives can motivate people, but I know you can demotivate people. And so the executive's job is to hire people that are self-starters, self-motivated, and don't inappropriately shut them down. Now, if they got goofy ideas, shut them down. I had somebody once say, you got to let the birds fly. And my response is, you just don't want to let all the animals out of the barn. And so we got to think judiciously about who gets that time. And so I'm not saying that I don't want to say that you got to choke these people. And so please, Sarang, don't get me wrong. But I'm also saying I'm not sure that 4 hours a week is going to give you the return that you might get if you were just letting the good ideas bubble up. And that's just a personal reflection. I've not studied it in a research project, but it's kind of observation.
So I'm going to give myself the last word.
Please. I'm going to mute my mic.
So I would have 100% agreed with Sarang's statement there, frankly. And that is what we did at Navtech. I didn't see it so much at Motorola, but Navtech, I saw quite a lot of that. And I can't remember what we called them. They're like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So it causes me, when you say that, Bruce, I kind of question, yeah, but then how do you do it? And we're not going to answer that on this call because we're going to leave you all wanting more. I want to do this topic again. It might not even be this year, frankly, because we kind of have scheduled things out, but I want to do this topic again. And I think the mechanics of creating it, Bruce, has to be something that we talk about because that's where Sarang is getting, and that's where I'm getting too, honestly, is okay, but then how do I create it?
And I'm with you both on this. So Sarang, okay. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, how do we get there?
Yeah, agreed. So let's leave it there. I thought it was a really good conversation. Thank you, everybody. Please do come back next month to hear how we're utilizing AI to dig into big knowledge bases. And have a great rest of the month.
Yeah, right, everybody. Thanks so much. This is wonderfully wide-ranging. And I see all these comments that I haven't read, so I'll go back and read them next.
We'll make sure you get those, Bruce.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
This
is great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you there or gone?